All right, the lesson I'm reflecting on is about sorting. There's a first lesson in the unit about sorting. So this particular lesson was about selection sort, and it was done in an AP Computer Science class where we're learning three different sorting algorithms. And this was the introduction to selection sort. So the goal was not to be able to code it, but just to be able to perform it on a set of numbers. So to start off the lesson, I just kind of went really basic and said, here's an array, a list of ints that are not in order. And then if we sorted them, this is what it would look like. And this unit is about the different algorithms, different ways to sort a set of numbers or other data. Instead of showing them how to sort, like presenting the algorithms right away, I actually just gave them a set of 6 playing cards and said, okay, go ahead and sort them. Right? How would you do this? Trying to think of a set of steps, an algorithm that could be used to sort them, a process. I didn't have them write anything down. Just try the cards, 6 cards, with a partner, go through and practice sorting it. A lot of them actually figured out the selection sort on their own, or some version of it. And just to make the rest of this clear, I'm going to try and explain it real quick here in this video. So in case you've never heard of it, you have an idea of how it works. So to get them in order from least to greatest, selection sort just takes this first position and says, I want to select the smallest element and put it here. So it basically searches all the way through and says, okay, 3 is the smallest. It goes all the way to the end to make sure that 3 is the smallest. And then it just swaps the 3 and the 10. So it kind of takes the 10 out, moves the 3 over there, and puts 10 in place of where 3 was. At this point, it considers the 3 sorted, right? It's going to make a little check mark here. So that one's sorted, and now it's just going to sort the rest of the array in the same way. So it takes the next spot and says, I want to find the smallest element of the ones that remain. So it searches all the way down the line and says, okay, 7 is the smallest. So it's just going to select it and swap it into this position. So it's going to take the 7, move it over here, and then say the jack is going to go back where the 7 was. Now it does a little check mark here and says this one is good, right? And it keeps going until all of the array has been sorted. Sometimes, the 9 is the minimum, so it still searches, and the 9 just stays in place, right? So by the end, we would have done one more swap here, and it ended up looking like that. All right, so after they'd played around with sorting on their own, then I explained selection sort on the board, much like we just did with the cards here. And then I had them practice it. So I had them mix up their 6 cards or take 6 new cards, and then sort them this time using the selection sort algorithm. So just kind of watch them to make sure they could actually go through and do the steps in the algorithm. And at this point, lots of them could already. So that was actually pretty good. And I kind of skipped over some of the other intro stuff. The one other thing I did do here in the beginning was there's this website that helps them visualize algorithms. And so I pulled up the selection sort one and just kind of walked them through where it's going to go through and search for the minimum element, which in this case is the 8. So it searches all the way, make sure 8's the minimum, and then it just kind of swaps the 8 and the 47. Right? Then it considers this sorted, and then it just repeats the process. So along the way here, I asked them a lot of questions to make sure they understood, like what element's going to end up here next, or what's the array going to look like after one more time through, or what's going to be the minimum position. Started to talk a little bit about the code too, where, do we really need to find the minimum element, or do we need to find the position of the minimum element? So as I was going through this, I just asked them a bunch of different questions to kind of make sure to see if they were actually understanding how selection sort worked. All right, there was a few other parts of the lesson that I did to try and make sure they were understanding it. I think at this point I had them write out what they thought the algorithm for selection sort would be, a series of steps. Just kind of observed them while they were doing that. And I felt like at this part of the lesson, for the most part, students met the objective of being able to perform selection sort. I felt like they could do that for the decent percentage of them could perform it on a set of numbers. To make sure that everything was okay, I gave them a worksheet for homework for the night, which just had kind of a couple different types of questions. Some to see if they understood it, how the algorithm worked, and then just a few questions to what the code starts to look like, just to see if they could get that next kind of advanced step to it. Okay, and here's sort of what the worksheet looked like. I have 3 different students here. and just gave them an array and some of the code, and then just tried to have them analyze what was happening in the code. The first student um, struggled with some of these questions with the code here. The min location should have been the location of the smallest element the first time through, which should have been 3. 2 looks like the min element there. So they struggled a little bit with under interpreting the code. Here's a little bit of swap code that they had to write, which is part of selection sort. And then the find minimum code was actually pretty good for this student too. So he seemed to understand this code part of it, but just missed a few kind of basic questions here. And what was really good is on the back was basically some really basic questions like what does it look like after one swap? So you can see that one time through this array, the 1 and 6 should be swapped because it would find the minimum 1 and swap it with the 6. They got that. And then after the second time through, find the min of 2, so the 2 and 5 would swap. And so it looks like the student really got this part of it, which was the goal. Right? So in analyzing whether or not they got it, I looked a lot at this question, and a really high percentage of the kids were able to do this back page, which had these kind of sort of understanding questions. To a good 80% were able to do that. And then some of the more advanced students, this was what their work looked like. They could write the code really well, which I think really, if they can write the code, then I think they understand it at a pretty high level. And they also got some of these back questions correct. So it was a good sign for that. So walking away from the lesson, I felt like most of them could meet the objective of doing it. There was a handful of kids, I think 5 or 6, that did not turn in this worksheet. So I didn't have a great indication of whether or not they could do it. Felt like based on the other students, they were probably okay. And from what I saw in class, they seemed to be okay. But without this worksheet, it was really hard to know for certain. And kind of in the bigger picture of this, talking about what I thought went well in this lesson, I feel like the card activity was really good. Especially, I like the idea of having them sort them on their own first. I feel like a lot of them came to selection sort. It's kind of the most intuitive one, so they were able to come to it on their own without any presentation from the teacher. So I really liked using the cards. I also think this worksheet's a pretty good way to see how well they understood selection sort. It has questions in all different levels, so you could kind of see if they were more advanced or just doing the beginning parts of it. What definitely needed work come test time, there was actually a handful of students that weren't so great at just doing a question like number 5 here. They actually be able to perform this selection sort. So I think maybe just needed more review between um, the time when we first introduced it to the point where we did the summative evaluation at the end. So just more practice with the cards or more examples in class, I think would have been a really good thing to help them uh, understand it better in the long run. I think especially because once you mix the different sorts together, so individually they understood selection sort when we did it in class, but then when you mix in the other two, they kind of would start to mix up what happened in the 3 different methods. So giving them more practice and more practice differentiating between the sorts, I think would be a good way to improve it. So overall summary of this lesson, I liked it. I liked the order that I went in. I actually keep a list of the steps of the things I did in class.